Molly Karen is a freshman at Emerson College, where she studies marketing and plays soccer for the Emerson women's team. 2 years ago, in a high school soccer game, Karen took a nasty shot to the head.
I was kneed in the back of the head, and I went down, and I was, crying a lot.
It was clear right away Karen had a concussion, and it turned out to be a severe one.
I had a chronic headache and migraine that lasted for 3 months. And that was really the worst, and I would try to take, medicine, extra strength, Tylenol, to help take the edge off, but it wouldn't even touch the headache. I was also nauseous, dizzy. I experienced sensitivity to light and sound, which I still experience a little bit today.
For weeks, simple activities were off limits. Driving, schoolwork, even watching TV. Karen responded by throwing herself into concussion advocacy, specifically raising awareness of something called baseline testing. The premise is simple. Athletes get their brain function tested before they're injured to make treatment afterward more precise. Karen didn't have a baseline test, and that made her doctor's job tougher.
It was really hard for my doctor to give a comparative standard as to where my brain function was at, so he was really hesitant to put me back on the field and to clear me to drive again, and things that were really crucial.
That's why the legislature is considering requiring baseline testing for every high school athlete in Massachusetts. Meanwhile, a growing number of schools and towns are embracing it on their own. Neuropsychologist Neil McGrath works with 45 different schools at his clinic in Brookline and says baseline testing takes the guesswork out of concussion treatment.
One of the things we see at all levels of sports is that athletes tend to suppress or deny symptoms. They want to play. They don't want to be not well. So many of them are very willing to say, my headaches aren't too bad. I can play with this dizziness. They're willing to do it, but the risks are substantial if they go back to play with symptoms.
The test McGrath uses takes about 20 minutes and measures a range of cognitive functions, like the ability to recall random sequences of words and patterns.
Was one of these designed to split? I don't believe so.
No, you know what? Be careful, because if it's rotated, it doesn't count.
All right.
The end result, a profile of the healthy brain that's used as a benchmark after an injury takes place. If the injury is severe, like it was for high schooler Becky Raphael, the contrast can be breathtaking.
From the follow-up tests you did, did you see a lot of change in the results? Really?
No, a lot.
I couldn't believe it.
Last winter, during an Austin prep hockey game, Raphael suffered 2 head traumas in a matter of seconds, smashing headfirst into the boards and then landing on her jaw after she was tripped by an opponent.
She lifted her stick over, and I legit did a flip over and landed right in my jaw. And I was just laying down there getting ready to cry. I was like, I know something is definitely wrong.
But Raphael kept playing. On the bus ride home, her symptoms hit with a vengeance.
I felt a little nauseous, and everybody was so loud, so I just wanted to get off the bus. I had the ringing in the ears, and I was sensitive to the light. So I was just kind of
Today, Raphael's recovery is nearly complete. She's skating without contact and itching to get back to regular play. When we spoke with her last week, she was sure Dr. McGrath would give her the okay.
I think so. I'm 100% sure.
Yeah, this past couple of weeks, because I know it, I feel it. I haven't been experiencing any headaches, any sensitivity to light, to sounds. So, yeah.
But McGrath wants her to wait 2 more weeks. Her mom says Becky is deeply frustrated. Molly Karen can relate, but says it's important to keep the urge to compete in perspective.
If it gets really intense, I try to not go at it so hard, just because I know that there's a chance that it might happen again. And in my eyes, soccer is probably one of the greatest things in the world to me, but my life in the future is a lot more important.
I'm joined now by Casey Atkins, who suffered several concussions while playing college lacrosse, and Dr. Robert Cantu, a neurosurgeon who advises the NFL on head, neck, and spine injuries, and who helped treat Casey's injuries. So, Casey, you were playing lacrosse. What happened to you?
I was playing lacrosse. I was a goalie in lacrosse a little over 10 years ago at George Washington University. I was doing just a simple drill where my teammates lined up on what's called the fan and would shoot at me. It helped me work on my angles as a goalie. One of my teammates shot out of sequence and caught me off guard with a hard shot to the head, and I was wearing a helmet. And I felt pretty fine afterwards. I didn't notice anything was really that bad until practice had ended, and I sort of recall just this fog.
So the same symptoms that you heard those two young girls describe?
Yeah, for me it was the dizziness, fogginess, a real sense of something's really not right here. And I think the more severe symptoms came later as I was pressured to continue playing.
Well, Dr. Cantu, that is a critical point. She was pressured to play. I'm listening to those two young girls that Adam spoke to, and I'm going to put point blank to you. If you were their doctor, would you let them get back on the ice or get
Not
back
if
into
they're
the
still
soccer field?
symptomatic, Emily, and the most important thing I heard was that there were still some symptoms going on, and if that's the case, no, I don't think it would be safe to go back. With regard to the baseline testing, I totally support it, but whether it be at the National Football League level or whether it be at the college level or whether it be at the high school level, whether it be in your doctor's office, I don't believe the only tool that should be used is neuropsychological testing, because the brain can still be normal from the standpoint of cognitive issues, but be off in terms of balance, coordination, eye tracking. So if you're going to do baseline testing, it has to be more, in my opinion, than just exclusively neuropsychological testing.
Well, Casey, one scenario is that athletes like yourself, you want to get back on the field, and you know you have to take a baseline test. You might fudge it. You might intentionally make things wrong so that then later on, if you do get an injury, people say, oh, see, she was foggy in the first place. So, I mean, is that a scenario? Can you imagine, now you're an adult now, but 10 years ago, could you imagine yourself doing something like that because you wanted to play?
I can certainly sympathize with those students as to wanting to get back out and play. It's very frustrating being sidelined, especially with a head injury where the return to play timeline can be unknown. However, I don't know that as a student athlete I would intentionally fudge the first test while I was healthy in order to give myself leeway in the second test. You know, frankly, I think in high school I wouldn't have even thought of that.
Wouldn't have thought of that. Now they'll think of it.
Yeah, and I think there's so much more awareness now.
Yeah.
And you know, especially Dr. Robert Cantu's work that he's done for decades really has risen the profile of concussions, and I think people, especially student athletes, are more aware now and concerned, and as are parents.
Well, on the types of sports, because we have so much focused on the NFL, and as you know, of course, Frontline is doing the documentary on the NFL tomorrow, because that's critical and everybody watches that. But it's every sport. I wouldn't have thought of lacrosse as being particularly dangerous, but we were talking before the show about cheerleading, that the girls that get thrown through the air are particularly vulnerable. All kinds of sports. Softball. Anything really that involves an object that's being thrown or hurled in any kind of way towards the head.
Yes, Emily, you can be concussed doing virtually any sport. And certainly we think of football right up there at the top and ice hockey, but you can within sports that as the sport itself are safe. Like cheerleading is safe, running around with a megaphone saying rah, rah, rah. If you're the flyer on the top of a three-high pyramid, that's a very dangerous position. Track is very safe. Being a pole vaulter is not so safe. So within sports, there are subsections that are quite risky.
Do you think, Casey, this baseline testing, if it were instituted in high schools everywhere, would make a difference? Or?
I do think it would have made a difference for me, and it also would have made a difference for my coaches and my teammates, because one of the difficulties with concussions is some of the symptoms, you know, you may feel them, but it's very difficult for some other people to see them. It's not, you know, having an ACL tear. It doesn't show up on imaging scans, and you don't wear a cast, you're not bleeding, you don't have a broken bone, and so I think having something that really shows, you know, where your brain is in the process of healing, or not even where your brain is in the process of healing, but clearly you are not who you were beforehand, and there is a timeline of healing that needs to take place, is very valuable for all who are involved, especially parents and students who have to take an active role in advocating for themselves in this
I mean, I think it's also important to realize that we all don't have the same balance. Not everybody is asymptomatic before they've ever had a concussion. There's such things as ADD, ADHD, panic attacks, anxiety disorders, on and on and on. And so if, as a doctor, we see somebody after they've had a concussion and they have these underlying conditions, We don't know how much of the symptomatology we're seeing now is from the concussion versus how much is the underlying condition. And more importantly, when we think they've recovered from the concussion, they're not going to be asymptomatic. They're just going to be back to their baseline. And it would be much better to really know what that was beforehand.
Do any of these concussions have permanent, long-lasting, well into adulthood effect?
Yes, unfortunately, it's a minority, thank goodness. But there are a number of individuals with post-concussion syndrome that go on for months. The young lady, Karen, was an example of 3 months plus. She's talking about some residual symptoms mildly even now. Unfortunately, a number of individuals will have symptoms that last many months. Some will have them last a few years, and a very small percentage will have them permanently.
Do you feel like you're totally back to normal?
I have actually suffered from concussions after that. That concussion in college took 6 months to recover from with post-concussion syndrome. Part of the issue there was the pressure to continue to play, and I got further concussions. And later on, years later, after I had recovered, I slipped and fell, and I had another concussion. I was out of work for 3 months.
Oh my gosh!
A year and a half later, I slipped and fell again, and I was out of work for 10 months. It's a scary sense, I think, and again, I may be in the minority, but some folks, you get a real sense of being fragile, and one misplaced step, and you can be in the dark for a little while.
We're good now. All right, Casey Atkins and Dr. Robert Cantu, thanks so much. All right, well, our coverage continues tomorrow in advance of Frontline's documentary League of Denial, which premieres at 9 on WGBH2. Join us for Greater Boston at 7 as we explore how locally developed innovations could make contact sports safer. Also tomorrow, WGBH News science editor Heather Goldstone on the problem of pharmaceuticals leaching into our drinking water. I'm Emily Rooney. Thanks for watching.